Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha, Gurureva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Chinmayam Vyapyat Sarvam, Trilokyam Sacharacharam, Tatpalam Darshitam Yena, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Tvameva Mata cha Pita, Tvameva Tvameva Bandhuscha Sakha, Tvameva Medya Dravinam, Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva, Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Jai Guru. Om Sahana Bhavatu, Sahana Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karavavahai, Tejasvina Vadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So last week we tipped over a point, a peak in our study of this text. So up until last week, we have been talking about discrimination between the self and the not self. We went through the three bodies: gross, subtle, causal. I am not those. We went through the five koshas. I'm not the physical body. I'm not the prana. I'm not the manomaya kosha. I'm not the vijnanamaya kosha. I'm not the anandamaya kosha. And so at the acme of that, when I have negated everything, I am that consciousness by which everything is known, without which nothing can be known, beyond which there's nothing to know. So then Shankara last week shifted everything. And he said, essentially, well, actually, this is a partial truth. What we have been calling the not self is the self. Wait a minute, that makes no sense. So the idea is the phenomenal world is consciousness appearing as name and form. The world is, but what it is the play of consciousness. What it's not is solid matter separate from me with joy-giving and misery-producing qualities. And he gave us all these various metaphors. The mud in the pot. That was the big one, the kumbha, the pot. So is it bowl, is it vase, is it pot? Actually, it's just mud appearing as those various things. So tables and chairs and horses and people, all of it is nothing but consciousness appearing as these various names and forms. And the other great metaphor that we talked about last week was to understand the dream state. You are the god of your dream. In your dream, you have a dream body. You have a dream ego that seems to be inside that body. We peep out through the dream body's senses at a dream world of name and form. And I have dream thoughts and feelings inside. But I am not in the dream. The dream is in me. It is my mind appearing as the dream world of name and form. This comes about in a similar manner. The difference is who is doing the dreaming. You as an individual are the God of your dream. But the Lord, Ishvara, is spinning this by its Maya Shakti. All is Maya, but all is bliss. That's where we left off last week. Any thoughts on this? And I think we're starting with 240. And Deepa is going to be our chanter this evening. Ganesh is not with us.
Should I start, Jim?
Yes, please.
Aheya manupadeyam manovacham gocharam aprameya manadyantam brahmapurnamaham maha. That which can neither be thrown away nor taken up, that which lies beyond the limits of mind and speech, which is immeasurable, which is without beginning and end, which is whole and one's own self, which is outshining glory, that is the self.
Yes. So here, this consciousness, which is experienced as I, you can throw away anything in the world of name and form or take something up. But when are you ever not you? You are an eternal constant. That was the first idea. What was the next idea, please, Deepa?
Um, that which can neither be thrown away nor taken up,
We
that,
just did that.
that which lies beyond the limits of mind and speech.
Yes. So anything I can say about it, that isn't it. Any concept I can grasp, that isn't it. I love what Gita says. He who knows it not. She who knows it not knows it. So if you think you know it as information, as data, oh yes, I've read all these Upanishads, I have great learning. That's not it. But if you can unknow, stop your mind. All that's left is the light of pure awareness. Next idea.
Which is immeasurable.
Yes. How big are you? Sometimes it feels like I'm a point from which I peep out at the world. Sometimes when I look behind my eyes, it seems vast and infinite. The truth is, you are outside of time and space. You are without dimension. You are immeasurable. Next idea.
Which is without beginning and end.
Yes. You cannot find a beginning to you. You can't say, oh, I had a terrible time yesterday. Myself stopped. Never happens. You have no beginning and no end. even when the body dies, you will not end. Next idea.
which is whole and one's own self.
Yes. It is whole. Has no parts. And the self in me and the self in you, they are the same. The self in me is not like the self in you. The self in me is the self in you. Beautiful, beautiful meditation verse. I'm curious, does he footnote this? I have a sense that this may have been taken from another scripture.
No,
All
no.
right, next verse.
I think it's two together. Tatvam padabhyamabhidhiyamanayo brahmatmano shodita yoryaditham shrutya tayostattvamasiti samyak ekattvameva pratipadyate muhu aikyam tayor lakshito. This is interesting. Ekyam tayor lakshitayor navachayo nigatyate nigatyatenyo anya viruddha dharmino ravadot ravadyota bhan voriva rajabhrityayo kupam burasyo paramanu paramanu mervo. If Shruti in her maxim that thou art repeatedly establishes the identity of Brahman and Jiva, indicated by the term that and thou respectively, then stripping these terms of their relative associations, their implied but not literal meanings are to be inculcated, for they are of contradictory attributes like the sun and the glowworm, the king and the servant, the ocean and the well, Mount Meru and the atom.
So, we're getting what's called an exegesis, which is a pulling apart and an understanding of one of the great Mahavakyas. Maha means great, Vakya is something that's uttered, this profound and great utterances. The primary ones we usually say are four in number. The first, Prajnanam Brahma. Brahman is consciousness, comes from the Aitreya Upanishad. The second one, Ayamatma Brahma, this self is Brahman, comes from the Mandukya Upanishad. We were talking about that earlier. This third one, Tattvamasi, that thou art, comes from the Chandogya Upanishad. And the fourth one, Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman, comes from the Brihadaranyakam Upanishad. So these are the four great utterances that encapsulate the entire teaching of Vedanta. So this third one, Tattvamasi, is also called the Upadesha Mahavakya. Upadesha means to teach or to instruct. So all of the various branches of our yoga, our sadhana, are implied in this. So what do we mean by it? Tat literally just means that. The ultimate God. Tvam simply means you, we find tu, tu, all these various words in Romance language. It's the same word. It's the same word. You. Asi means is, or they are the same. That you are, using modern English. Well, that seems impossible. I'm not very powerful. I can't make the ocean do anything. I can't even make my friends do anything. How can I be God? That doesn't make any sense. Now, people look at this, and one of the traps that people get into, they try to take this sense of jiva, individuality, and make it really big. I want to become the most powerful person. So I'm going to get siddhis so I can levitate and astral project and control other people. It has nothing to do with that. It's not about you becoming a god. So we have a technical term in this verse called lakshanam. Lakshanam means the implied or inferred meaning. We have to suss out what the implied meaning of it is. So, what we're going to look at is a contrast between the macrocosm and the microcosm. Macrocosm, God. Microcosm, me. So let's find out what's really going on. God, macrocosm, has a physical body. Ooh, that sounds interesting. But it's not Krishna who's blue with 4 arms. It's not Lord Shiva with a 3rd eye. The body of God is the Jagat. It's the physical universe. You have a physical body, the meat lump. We've talked about that. God has a subtle body, the total mind, we call it. All the thoughts and feelings which have ever been thought, which ever can be thought. Technical term for this is called Hiranya Garbha, which means the golden egg. But it's the total mind, the sum total of all the minds in creation, which is greater than the sum of its parts. We can say it's the mind of God. You have a subtle body, your feelings, your thoughts, etc. God has a causal body. We would call it the total vasana. And the technical term for the total vasana is Ishvara, the Lord. He who wishes and wills. Ichati is the root. So that force that intends everything that has ever happened, that ever will happen, that ever could happen, is the cosmic causal body. You and I have our individual vasanas. But the ground of being, which we call Brahman, Prajnanam Brahma, it's the first Mahavakya. Brahman is consciousness. The creation, the total mind, the total vasana occurs in one small corner of infinite consciousness. And you and I have at the core of us, I, aham. And that last Mahavakya, aham brahmasmi, I am Brahman. The self in me, that witnessing consciousness, and that ground of being of the entire universe, they are the same. So when you have realized the self in you, you realize the self in everyone and everything. So you're sitting out there looking at your computer screen. I'm here in my living room looking at my iPad. You are aware of your body. I'm aware of my body. You are aware of your thoughts and feelings. I'm aware of my thoughts and feelings. But when you look behind your eyes and notice the knower, there's just this vast, empty space of consciousness. And I look behind my eyes and notice the knower. There's just the vast, empty space of consciousness. The self in me and the self in you is the same as the ground of being of the entire creation. So this is the deeper meaning of this great Mahavakya, Tattvamasi. So these four Mahavakyas build the first one. What is ultimate reality? Prajnanam Brahma. Ultimate reality is Brahman. Where is it? I am Atma, Brahma. This self is Brahman. Sure doesn't seem like it. Now go through the process. Tattvamasi. You are not your body. God is not the Jagat. You are not your subtle body. God is not the total mind. You are not your vasanas. God is not the total vasana. You are the very experience of I. And the ground of being of the whole creation is consciousness. And finally, we have that great exclamation at the moment of realization. Not aham mahatma, I'm a great being. Aham guru. No. Aham brahmasmi. I am Brahman. In those four statements is the totality of the teaching. Any thoughts on this? That's what, 241 and 242?
Yeah, that was 241, 242 that we just talked.
243, please.
Tayo virodho yamupadhikalpito navastava kaschid kaschidupadiresha ईशस्य माया महदादिकारणं जीवस्य कार्यं शृणु पञ्चकोशम्. The difference between them is only created by superimposition and is not real. The conditioning in the case of Ishvara is Maya or Mahat, and so on, and listen. The conditionings in the case of the Jiva are the five sheets.
So we've gone through that. Mahat just means the creation, created by Maya. So the superimpositions on Brahman, created by Maya, the Jagat, physical creation, Hiranyagarbha, the total mind, Ishvara, the total vasana. And for you and me, it's the five koshas. Next verse.
एतावुपाधि परजीवयोस्तयो संयं निरासे न परो न जीवः राज्यं नरेन्द्रस्य भटस्य खेटक तयोरपोहे न भटो न राजो. These two are superimpositions of Ishvara and Jiva, but when they are completely eliminated, there is neither Ishvara nor Jiva. When the kingdom of the king and the shield of the soldier are taken away, there can neither be a king nor a soldier.
No. So if the king decides that he needs to fight his enemy, he takes off his crown and he takes off his expensive robe and he gets into his chariot with his shield and he goes to war. So if you take the king and you take off his crown and robe, and if you take the warrior on the field and you take off his shield, it's the same person. So these are what we call upadhis, conditionings. So what's the difference between the people we don't like or the people we think are unjust, the people we think are saintly? It's just the conditionings that are different. The self in everyone is the same. So your particular body, mind, intellect is just a costume that the Lord is wearing. But so is everyone else's. So is the entire phenomenal creation. Any thoughts? All right, next one.
अथात् आदेश इति श्रुति स्वयं निषेधति ब्रह्मणि कल्पितं द्वयं श्रुति प्रमाणानुगृहीतबोधात् तयो निरास करणीय एव. Now is the injunction, and so on. In these words, The scriptures reject the imagined duality in Brahman. Supported by the authority of the scriptures, one must certainly eliminate these two superimpositions by means of direct realization.
Yes. So now is the injunction, etc., is uh, a quotation or footnoting the way the verse actually starts in the Chandogya. It says, "Now is the injunction that thou art." So that's how the mantra actually starts. So Shruti herself says this. So how do we come to directly experience it? So we have three questions we must answer now. First one we've worked on, Koham, who am I? Question number two, what is this phenomenal universe and how has it come about? What is this phenomenal universe? What I see as name and form is just the play of consciousness. It's like a mirage. How has it come about? By the mysterious Maya Shakti of the Lord. So the practice that's implied here is to continue to keep intensely introverting the mind, not letting it gush out into the world. Many of you have heard me tell this story. When a Shisha, a student, was beginning to tune up and ripen, Swamiji would just bring them into his orbit. He would have them spend time with him, travel with him. So that they would stay tuned up no matter what was happening in the outer world, keeping this deep introversion. And my dear friend Vilasini had the great merit. She took the 2.5 year training course when she was a late teen, early 20s, something like that. And then she got to serve as Swamiji's secretary, his personal assistant, for several years. And she's really deep yogi. And she was riding in a car in the back seat, and Swamiji was being driven by, a family going from one place to another. And he used to like to ride shotgun in the passenger seat in the front. And there was the 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 gal who was the wife of the person who was driving was in the back seat. And she kept turning to Vilasini and asking her all these questions, where are you from? And how did you meet Swamiji? And Vilasini was politely answering. Finally, Swamiji just turns to her and says, "Will you shut up? Can't you see she's in meditation?" Now, I'm sure these people were substantial donors to the mission, too. He could care less. But he wanted to protect that Vilasini had withdrawn her mind from the world, was in deep meditation, eyes wide open, functioning in the world, but the mind intensely introvert. I'm thinking of the retreat we did up at Ananda. God, it's been almost 2 years ago now. And I think it was on like about the third day. We came from morning meditation into the dining hall for tea. And I could tell there were so many of you who were there. Your minds were so quiet. Eyes wide open, drinking your tea, but your mind stayed in meditation. And then one of the kitchen help came out. Their mind was all very open and extroverted. And they blah, 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 blah. And you could just, oh my God, you could feel the difference. That our silent wave folk, deeply introverted. This is the secret of how to begin to experience the phenomenal world as Brahman. Next verse.
नेदं कल्पितत्वान सत्यं रज्जो दृष्टव्यालवत्स प्रवञ्च इत्थं दृश्यं साधु युक्त्या व्यपोह्य ज्ञेय पश्चादेक भावस्तयोर्यः. Neither this gross nor this subtle, like the snake seen in the rope, and like dreams are not real, being products of the imagination. By a perfect elimination of the objective world by reasoning, one must realize the oneness underlying the Jiva and the Ishvara.
Yes. So, mind you, this elimination of the objective world does not mean some state of insensibility. Just as we go, I am not the body, I am not the mind, I am not the thoughts, I'm not the ego sense. But I keep my mind absolutely poised still, no matter what it is that I see or experience. Now, in the beginning, we may only be able to do this for maybe a 10-minute walk. But eventually, we want to be able to keep the mind at meditation throughout the whole day. Keeping it tuned up. When the mind extroverts, keep the discrimination going. That person, place, thing, or condition is just consciousness appearing as name and form. It has no real value. It has no real power. There's nothing to crave, and there's nothing to fear. It's all God, and it's all good. Next verse.
ततस्तु तौ लक्षणया सुलक्ष्यौ तयोरखण्डे परसत्त्वसिद्धये नालं जहत्या न तथा जहत्या किन्तु भयार्थात्मिकयैव भाव्यम्. Therefore, the two terms, Ishvara and Jiva, should be carefully considered through their indicative meanings in order to establish their absolute identity. Neither the method of total rejection nor the method of complete retention will suffice. One must reason by a combined process of both.
So by method of total rejection, you can't say, no, the individual is not God. That won't work. No, by the method of total acceptance. My ego is God. Do what I say. No, we have to use this lakshanam. Find the implied meaning. Next verse.
There's two together, Jim.
Okay.
सदेव दत्तोऽयमितिह चैकता विरुद्धधर्मांशमपास्य कथ्यते यथा तथा तत्त्वमसीति वाक्ये विरुद्धधर्मानुभयत्र हित्वा संलक्ष्य चिन्मात्रतया सदात्मनोः अखण्डभावः परिचीयते बुधे एवं महावाक्यशतेन कथ्यते ब्रह्मात्मनोरैक्यमखण्डभावः. This is that Devadatta, just as in this sentence, the identity expressed is arrived at by eliminating contradictory portions. So too it is in the statement that thou art. Men of wisdom should give up contradictory elements on both sides and recognize the identity of Ishvara and Jiva, carefully noting that the essence of both is knowledge absolute. In such hundreds of scriptures, wise declare the oneness and the identity of the Brahman and the Jiva.
So the name Devdatta is akin to what we would say John Doe today. This is that John Doe. So Swamiji always used to tell the story about the Westerners who were traveling in India. So they came to India and they were quite overwhelmed by this vast new culture. And they ended up in the train depot in Delhi. Any of you been to the old Delhi train station? And you see the wallahs with the stuff on their heads, and it's incredibly confusing for a Westerner. This fellow comes up and he's wearing a suit jacket and he says, "May I help you, sir?" He says, "Yes, we need to catch such and such a train. Um, can you help us?" He says, "Oh, sure." And he says, "It'll be so and so many rupees. I will take your baggage." So he takes the bags, and then the fellows go and they find their train. And then all of a sudden they realize the fellow was a thief and he stole their luggage. So it really ruined their trip. So they go back to the United States, and several years later, they decide to return to India. Now they know a little bit better. This trip, they decide to visit Rishikesh. So they travel all the way to Rishikesh, and there they are on the banks of Holy Ganga, down the beach, on the banks of the river is a sadhu. He's got these long matted locks and beard, completely naked except for a loincloth, body all covered with ash, with this Rudraksha mala around his neck. He's meditating on the beach. And they say, oh, let's go get his blessing. Let's go get his blessing. So they walk up quietly, and the fellow is in meditation. He opens his eyes, and they say, oh, Swamiji, give us your blessing. And then all of a sudden they look at him. And they said, this Shiva Sadhu on the banks of the Ganges in Rishikesh, you're the fellow that stole our luggage 5 years ago. Same man. 5 years ago, he's the thief from the train station. 5 years later, Sadhu on the banks of the river. Same man. What's different? The upadis, the conditionings. So with the world, the costume that consciousness is wearing is the entire creation. Mahat, the macrocosm. And the costume that the infinite is wearing for you and me, the 5 koshas. But the self in me and the self in everyone and the ground of being of the whole creation, they are the same. Now here is another practice that's implied. When you meet someone, don't just look at their upadis, their face or their hair or their clothes. Look into their eyes and remember that the conscious being looking out of those eyes is the Lord. And the conscious being looking out of those eyes is yourself. See the self in everyone. See the self in and through the whole creation. It's all God. It's all perfect. Any questions about this one? I don't tell the story as well as Swamiji did. He always got a big laugh. Next verse.
So, Jim, this verse has 6 lines in it. So it's interesting. Also, it's a new section called Attitude and Meditation.
Yes, it may just be prose, I'm not sure.
Okay. Astulamityetadasannirasya siddham swato vyoma vada pratarkyam ato mrishamatramidam pratitam jahihi yansvat mataya grihitam Brahmahamityeva vishuddha buddhya Vidhi swamatmanamakhanda bodham. Discarding the not self, in the light of the passages such as it is not gross and so on, one realizes the self, which is self established, unattached like the sky, and beyond the pale of thought. To negate this illusory body, which you perceive and have accepted as your own self, with the purified understanding that I am Brahman, realize your own self, which is knowledge absolute.
So here's the attitude in meditation. This is what we are to do in our meditation seat. So let's go through each of these processes, breaking them down. First idea, please, Deepa.
Discarding the not self.
Yes. So that's the overall process. I want to discard my identification with, my fascination with, my concern for the not self. Next idea.
In the light of the passages such as it is not gross and so on.
So we've had so many of these passages of what the self is not. Neti, neti, not this, not this. Next idea.
One realizes the self, which is self established, unattached like the sky and beyond the pale of thought.
So it is myself. It is self established, meaning it needs nothing else to establish it. It is self evident and completely detached from any of the conditionings and vast and empty like the sky. So practically speaking, I'm sitting in meditation and some painful memory comes up. I was abused as a child. They took my blankie away. Neti, neti, not this. Not this. Drop it. Or someone says something mean. How could they treat me like that? Don't they know who I am? Wasn't that what Kevin McCarthy said to the president? Do you know who you're talking to? All that kind of nonsense. Neti, neti, not this, not this. Instead, who am I? Aham Brahmasmi. I am that witnessing consciousness. I am Brahman. Chidananda Rupaham. Shivoham, Shivoham. I'm of the form of bliss consciousness. I am auspiciousness. I am Shiva. Asangoham, Asangoham. Unattached am I. Unattached am I. There's so many of these phrases. If it occurs in time and space, if it's a thought or a feeling or a sense perception, if it's in the past, the present, or the future exclusively, and most importantly, if it is an object of cognition, let it go. Drop it. Over and over and over. Next one.
The next idea, right, Jim?
Oh, yes, please.
So negate this illusory body which you perceive and have accepted as your own self. With the purified understanding that I am Brahman, realize your own self, which is knowledge absolute.
So, with a purified understanding, you mean your mind has to be sattvic, has to be very clear. Again, I was talking with a friend this past week, and she was very keen on this boy, and they had a spat, and it looks like they may be breaking up, and she's just devastated. So she does not have a pure understanding today. Today's not maybe the day to do Vedanta. You can't have a mind so filled with anguish. Instead, this is a time to do tapas. This is a time to practice vairagya. That desire to give up attachments to all enjoyments gained through the sense objects. What's wrong with me? I'm not worthy. I picked such bad fellows? That desire to give up all forms of self. You don't want to say, no, I'm a good person, I'm worthy. That's just what we call reframing. Drop the whole business. Prajnanam Brahma. Brahman is consciousness. Where is it? I am Atma Brahma. This self is Brahman. Tat Twamasi. You are that. Aham Brahmasmi. I am Brahman. I'm not this whiny creature. Drop it. Tune up the mind. You are either taking the world as real or you are realizing yourself. Mutually exclusive states. Next verse.
Okay, this is a new meter, so I'll do my best.
Are we in a new section?
It's the same section as this long verse. It's called Attitude and Meditation.
All right.
Mritakaryam sakalam ghatadi satatam mrinmatramevahitam tadvat sajjanitam sadatmakamidam sanmatramevakhilam yasmanasti satah param kimapi tatsatyam sas atma swayam tasmat tattvamasi prashantamamalam brahmadvayam yatat param. All modifications of mud, such as the pot, are accepted by the mind as real, but are in fact mud alone. So too, the entire universe, which comes from Brahman, is Brahman alone and nothing other than Brahman, the self existent reality, one's very own self. Thou art that, the serene, the pure, the supreme Brahman, the non dual.
So we look at it again in two ways. Remember my three questions. Who am I? What is this world? How has it come about? Self in me is Brahman. I am that. Not the body, not the mind, not the intellect, not the vasanas. What is this world? This world is name and form appearing to my senses. But what it is consciousness. How is it come about? In the same way a dream has, like an imagination. Pull your fascination of the individual names and forms out of it. Don't get involved with it. I had a friend who used to use a marvelous image. It's like being in a movie theater. You watch the movie. Don't get up on the stage and try to be a character in the movie. Watch the movie go by. It's like this long stream of images and experiences that passes in front of you. Entertaining, perhaps, frequently very funny. We can circle back to Shankara's definition of discrimination, Viveka. Remember what he said. Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya. Brahman alone is real. The phenomenal world is Mithya, literally illusion, false, a conditioned reality. Just the play of consciousness. All right, we'll stop here. And what verse are we starting on next week, Deepa?
251.
251. So we have a few minutes for questions.
I don't have a question, but I just have to say how profound those verses were.
Yes.
It's just so incredible. Like, even I just say, even if it's just even if it's not true, it just feels so good just to believe that it's true. It's, especially, in my, like, the past memories or the childhood trauma and all that, just believing that that's not true. That's not real, or that's the non-self, or the
Yes.
just feels so light. Just feels
Yes.
good.
Yes. And when you say, even if it's not true, meaning your past history, or do you mean the teaching?
The teaching.
But think, this is what the scriptures say, Shruti.
And the prophet.
Is what, but let's go through the four authorities. This is what the great saints and sages have said that they're true. Shankara says it's true. Swamiji says it's true. Ramana Maharshi says it's true. So far, I can tell you it's true. It makes good common sense.
Yeah.
Now you prove it. in the depth of your own experience. Have faith.
I do. And every time I feel it, it's more just like you were saying, conditional, like a habit. Just not even a bad or good. It's just a habit of conditioning, or to believe what I have believed all my life. It's just so hard. Just one day say like, oh, and I intellectually was, I like the idea and I tried to adopt it, but the habit was stronger. But with time, the habit is not as strong, and it just feels so good.
I had a student, and we were going through verses like this, and he got really tuned up. He was a comparatively new student, and he said to me, Jim, you've hypnotized us. And I said to him, no, I have de-hypnotized you. It's the world that has hypnotized you.
You said 251?
Yes, 251.
Okay, thanks.
Any other thoughts or questions or comments?
I have a question.
Oh.
Certainly. Who's that?
Me, Deepa.
Oh, please.
So if everything is the Brahman, both the self and the not self, there's a bit of a conundrum here in that case, then the craving and aversion are also the Brahman.
That's correct.
And every vasana, all the prarabdha that we talk about is all the Brahman.
It's all the Brahman.
Then why should we work to change anything at all?
What you're on the edge of is what I call the Vedanta logic loop. If it's all Brahman and it's all God, why do anything? So you might as well shoot heroin. Because the problem is not the Brahman. The problem is the human mind. Brahman has no problems. It's the human mind. In this world of Maya, we have a human mind. And that human mind, when it's covered by ignorance, is unhappy. And when the human mind awakens to reality, and what is it? We could say, what is the enlightened mind? It's the mind that no longer believes itself. It doesn't take itself seriously anymore. You can't think a real thought. And the mind just kind of crumbles. It doesn't postulate these sand castles of misery anymore. Both bondage and liberation occur to the mind. The self is ever free. What is bondage? The deeply rooted conviction that I am bound, meaning I think I'm my body. I'm hypnotized into thinking I'm my body. There is no other liberation than the deeply rooted conviction that I'm free, meaning through direct experience, I know Aham Brahmasmi. Also in Chandogya, we have another mini Mahavakya. one of my favorites. Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma. All this, Sarvam Idam, Kalu, is verily. Looks like a world of name and form. Is just the play of consciousness. I don't need to get all upset about it. You can. Knock yourself out. But you don't have to. Is that helpful, Deepa?
Yes, very. Thank you.
Now, was there another question? I thought there were two people who tried to speak at the same time.
No, you said if you have any ideas. It's not a question. Don't worry. I'm understanding what you're saying quite well.
All right. Anybody else? All right, let's meditate.